All right. I think we're good to go. Well, glad to be back on this stage. I've been a few times already. Thank you, Anka, for the invite here. I am the head of product at AnChain. Francesco, originally Italian, as you guys can probably tell by the name and the funny accent. I'm based in New York, and I'll talk to you guys today about security. So just a quick overview about AnChain. AnChain.AI stands for Analyze Blockchain with AI. So we are based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. We focus on Web3 security, obviously from investigations, compliance, and anything sort of like preventive in terms of like finding vulnerabilities and preventing hacks and scams from happening. Last year, we won the RSA Innovation. We were kind of one of the finalists on the RSA Innovation Sandbox, which is considered by many in the industry to be like the Oscar of cybersecurity. So it was like a great honor for us to be on that stage and to be the first Web3 company on that stage. So we are trusted by a lot of like major institutions on both private and public sector. So we work kind of like at the intersection with the two. And we come out of the Berkeley Blockchain Xcelerator. So we were in the first batch back in 2018 when the company was started. Just a quick overview. We have 5 products that we launched. We're going to go through some of them today, but I want to talk to you guys a little bit more about like what they do. And then we provide services as well in the cybersecurity space, from smart contract auditing to forensics, and a lot of training as well for the public sector folks. So our products are kind of like span the range of like compliance for anything anti-money laundering related, all the way to investigations when unfortunately hacks happen. And one of the things that we've been spending a lot of energies on and focus in the past year is really been around prevention, right? So I'll talk to you guys about Web3 SOC as well, which is one of the latest products that we launched. And it's an event monitoring platform for events emitted by smart contracts. So getting started, I wanted to start with some of the cool stuff, right? Hold on, I hear some pings here in the chat. I can't see the comments, Anka. So if there's any questions in the meantime, like feel free to stop me at any point. But my Discord started pinging me, so I'll just keep going. Feel free to stop me at any point. So I'll start talking about like some of the cool innovations using AI that we brought to the industry since 2018. A lot of the focus obviously in the past year and a half has been around large language models and how these can help interpret smart contracts, from like the source code of these smart contracts to the bytecode, to find vulnerabilities or explain exactly what the code does. Especially for regulator, it's very important. We've been using machine learning for years also to assess risk for billions of blockchain addresses on the blockchain, with regression models that we run that assign risks to any wallet on the blockchain. And obviously, a lot of the AI innovation is around streamlining and accelerating the manual tasks in blockchain investigation. So we have a patent for our auto tracing tool that allows sort of like tracing of funds whenever there's a hack or a scam, and there's a need to actually go in and do like an investigation, like a traditional follow the money sort of investigation. So touching on point one, we integrated LLMs and specifically GPT-4 in kind of like the smart contract space to interpret and find vulnerabilities in the smart contracts, right? I'm going to touch a little bit on these when I talk about the smart contract catalog that we developed for Soroban, where we basically created some open source smart contracts, and we plugged in GPT-4 to kind of like explain exactly what each function in that smart contract does, and also like to sort of like give you like quote unquote a light smart contract audit. So it's very important also for regulators, when you interface with regulators, for them to understand what you're launching. And obviously not all of them understand code. So this has been a pretty useful tool for them to understand what the technology behind your application does. Point two around AI and the usage of AI is on our risk scoring. What we have is basically a machine learning algorithm that we deployed that analyzes any transactions that happens on the blockchain and spins up like a risk score for any wallet on the blockchain based on their on-chain behavior, based on OSINT information that is available about that wallet, based on like involvement of that wallet in hacks, scans, or any sort of like suspicious behavior that may be deemed as risky. So I'll show you guys in a second. I have a short demo about this one as well. But one of the last things that I was telling you about is our auto trace for investigation. So a lot of the times when big hacks happen, investigators from both the private sector and public sector do these sort of like investigations manually. And time is of the essence when you're trying to find where money has been moved and where the money has been laundered. So we implemented some AI techniques to immediately find point of liquidations and so do these automated tracing and graphs that you see down below here to allow for like fast identification of like where the money is going. Now, we've been working with the team at Stellar and obviously supporting all the activity around Soroban for around a year and a half now. And we developed a few things for the ecosystem. We started with the wallet screening and transaction monitoring API that I'll show you in just a second. Where we basically provide free access to any developers building on Stellar /Soroban to this API. They can query it, they can find risk associated with wallets and transactions, and use it for free. We also are working on a smart contract monitoring tool, which I was telling you guys earlier, Web3 SOC. We'll dive a little bit deeper into it later, but this is one of the latest things that we're working on to help bring security tools to Soroban. We now like spinned up CISO, like we integrated Stellar into our CISO platform, which allows investigators to identify these suspicious transactions and follow the money. We also created an open source catalog of safe smart contracts that developers can go and either take as is and go deploy, or build on top of, or go modify, whatever they think is best, right? But as Soroban was getting started, we realized there weren't many sort of like standard smart contracts that had been created yet. So we put some time and effort to actually provide those tools. So diving deeper into one of the tools that we develop, I'm going to start with our API, since this I assume it's a bit of a developer audience, and specifically our BEI API, which stands for Blockchain Ecosystem Intelligence. And it's a very easy to use API. It's like 7 lines of code, and provides labels for addresses. It provides like risk scores for addresses, and it's super easy to use, right? I'll show you guys in a second how it can actually be integrated. But the whole idea is that when you are transacting as a consumer or as the operator of a project, you're allowing users to transact. You want to be able to see, who's the counterparty who's transacting on the other end. So is this obviously, most of the use cases and most of the transactions will be like low risk, but how do you know if the individual who's transacting has been involved in a hack, or is on a sanction list, right? Or there's some risky activity that they've been involved in. So we basically provide this information through our BEI API. Not only we provide a label, but we provide a risk score as well, which is a number from 0 to 100, where 0 means that the risk is pretty low, 100 means that the risk is very high. To give you an example, if someone has a risk score of 100, they're probably on the OFAC sanction list, for example, right? They're probably a terrorist somewhere, and OFAC put them on their sanction list. It's not.
I have a question coming in. As you mentioned, I could interrupt. Is that okay now? Is it now a good time?
Absolutely.
Morgan asks, Francesco, you mentioned tracking funds just now. Does that mean you guys have the wallet addresses for every exchange, hot and cold wallet?
That's a good question, right? So obviously saying we have it for all exchanges, right, would be an overstatement. But we have millions and millions of labels for wallets, specifically for a lot of like the exchange wallets. So if you're, obviously if it's a new exchange, it just, was just created out of somewhere, and there's not a lot of information about that, it's a little harder to have intelligence on that. But with millions of wallets and labels associated with Binance, for example, or Coinbase, or some of the major exchanges, and when we don't, we actually go and find it, right? So we have a threat intelligence team in-house, and we partner with folks as well who specifically work on threat intelligence to go and find those labels. I'll show you, actually. I should have some Binance or like other exchanges that I can show you in the demo. So, why integrating this API? Obviously, in a lot of jurisdictions, some of your application may be deemed as maybe require like a license. You may be kind of like categorized as a virtual asset service provider. And as part of that, you need to have like an anti-money laundering program in place, which includes sort of like do transaction monitoring and wallet screening. And in addition to that, it also sends like a pretty strong message to your users, right? That you're kind of like taking your security pretty seriously. And we provide free access, right? So that's kind of like a no-brainer on that front. Now, jumping a little bit more into the security aspect of this presentation, I want to bring up some of the data from the hacks that happened in the past few years to show you guys like one of the big issues that we've identified in Web3. So MTTR is one of the key metrics in cybersecurity. It stands for mean time to respond. So there's two key metrics in cybersecurity. One is MTTD and one is MTTR. Mean time to detect, mean time to respond. What does that mean? Well, mean time to detect means that it's the time that you take to actually identify that there's sort of like some attacks happening in your application, right? Or some attacks targeting you. Mean time to react or respond, it's used sort of like interchangeably, is the metric that tells you, okay, now that you've identified that there's this ongoing attack, how long does it take you to respond to it and go back to like normal operations? So in 2022 alone, there were around like $4 billion stolen in crypto. Last year was a little bit better. It went down 40%. We're talking about like 2.5 billion still, which is still high, but a good trend, right? We're seeing sort of like less money being stolen. But one of the main issues is that we have identified that a lot of the hacks that happened, unfortunately, companies were finding out that they were hacked way too late, right? Traditional cybersecurity tells you, hey, you want to identify that in the span of like ideally a few hours, right? In an ideal scenario, you want to identify almost immediately, right? Of course, there's always going to be a bit of a lag. But what we found out is that in Web3, that mean time to detect was around 7 days. So imagine you're, Ronin Bridge, you get hacked for $620 million, and you see here in this graph, you find out 5 days after. And it takes you, 100 days to actually recover. Obviously, you all kind of understand pretty clearly that if we want Web3 to go mainstream, and if we want institutions to actually come in and build on top of end user applications, these problem needs to be solved, right? There need to be tool and best practices around identifying and responding quickly to threats, because obviously the security postures of these big institutions is needs to be high, and right now we're still at a point in Web3 in which there's still a lot to be done on this front, right? We can't detect threats days after. We need to detect them immediately. So a lot of the work that we've been doing and that I've been preaching, right, at some of the events that I traveled to last year, is around bringing best practices that have been established in traditional cybersecurity, and just taking them and, without reinventing the wheel, applying them to Web3. So there's a very famous framework by the National Institute of Standard and Technology, NIST. Their cybersecurity framework is considered one of the best practices, right, in traditional cybersecurity, and it's composed of 5 different steps. Step 1, identify. Step 2, protect. Step 3, detect, respond, and recover. Now, if we look at how these apply in Web3, we see there's kind of a direct association or direct things and best practice that you can do at each of these steps. So for the identify step, for example, do your smart contract audit before you launch, right? You want to be able to identify vulnerabilities or attack vectors, right? They are kind of built into your smart contract or your application. Moving to step 2, did you do your incident response planning, right? Basically, if there's an incident, if something happens, do you have a plan in place to actually address what's happening? And that's super important, because the worst time to actually think about what to do is when you're under attack, right? You basically want to have some framework and some plans put in place in which, hey, there's an attack to my application. What am I going to do, right? What are my employees going to do? What are the users going to do? Who do we escalate these to, right? Basically some basic planning around that. Now, number 3 is detecting anomalies. How do you make sure that if you get attacked, you actually identify those attacks immediately? And that's traditional anomaly detection. It can be, hey, this sanction wallet is transacting with us, or it can be, hey, the admin privileges of my smart contract have been changed, right? Which is, it's just a matter of putting the right monitoring tools in place. Because if you don't have them, you're just not going to be able to detect, right? Then step 4 obviously is, okay, now let's go, we've been attacked. There's an incident ongoing. How do we respond to it? Step 5 is, okay, not only have we been attacked, but there's money was actually being stolen. How do I go and recover that money, right? And a lot of the times it's a matter of working with both law enforcement and exchanges, right? So say I come in and I steal money from a smart contract. As a hacker, what I want to go do after is sort of try to liquidate it, right? Obfuscate my trail, and then a lot of the times kind of convert that money to fiat money. And where do I do that? Is through exchanges, right? So having that, what we do with our tool is basically connecting the dots there and telling, hey, this money has just been moved to Binance. Now you might want to contact like Binance compliance team and try to freeze that money on their centralized exchange. So these are some of the 5 steps in the NIST cybersecurity framework. What we've been doing with Web3 SOC is kind of like try to bring a lot of these best practices into actual practice in a single tool that we're building on top of Soroban. So specifically Web3 SOC, and I see some of my colleagues here on the call as well. Some of them are engineers who are building actually Web3 SOC. I see Ryan, David, and I believe Jordan is here as well. But this is like a smart contract monitoring tool. So what it does is basically it alerts, it monitors and alerts if there's specific events that you want to be monitored for, you want to be alerted for in your smart contract. It detects anomalies. It kind of like has an event listener that goes through any event emitted by the smart contract, and it tells you, hey, the admin privileges have been changed, or there's a lot of money that is going out of the liquidity pool, blah blah blah, right? Whatever sort of like alerts you want to put in place. It has an incident response planning part as well, where you can kind of like create plans in advance. If this event is triggered, this is how I'm going to react. This is how my team is going to react. This is how we're going to be communicating internally. This is who we're going to escalate it with, etc. It also has a fire drill. The fire drill is sort of like an attack simulation, right? To kind of like help you train the team on reducing those key metrics, right? Mean time to detect and mean time to react. And obviously, like it integrates into any major like platform that you use, whether it's like Slack or Discord or Jira or classic email SMS. So this concludes my presentation. I want to show you guys a very short demo. I have a few extra minutes, Anke, if I'm still in time, to show quickly like the tool that we've been building.
Take it away.
Awesome. So let me share.
I mean, you might want to reshare your screen, just because some people had an issue looking at it. So.
Oh. Hold on. Let me stop.
Just if it's easy. Also, we have a question from Morgan. Once you're sharing, I'm happy to read it out loud.
Is this better?
So Morgan asks, this sounds a bit like IFTTT for smart contracts. Do you think it's an apt analogy?
Let me see. IFTTT. What does that stand for, Morgan? I'm not sure if I got the acronym correctly. Let me Google it real quick. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with IFTTT, so I can't speak to that too much. But
Morgan, if you're wanting to speak up, that'd be great.
Hey, Francesco. So my question is, IFTT is a pretty popular standard for automating all kinds of APIs together. It stands for if this, then that, kind of a sequence of things that happen. And the way you were describing your event listener sort of in automatic mitigation reminded me a whole lot of if this, then that. And I feel like that's similar, but I don't know if you could describe it the same way.
Yeah, I think, a lot of, again, I'm not super familiar, but thank you for the explanation, Morgan. a lot of the alerts that you set up in Web3 SOC and all the planning that you're doing in advance sort of have like rules that you set up, right? Hey, if this happens, then trigger this, right? Or then escalate this to this other person. So I assume it's like principles, or it's pretty similar to IFTTT. Happy to kind of like show you as well, and for you to get a better sense. It's still kind of like under development, but we can kind of like chat offline, then we can show you what we built there. In the meantime, I'll show you guys like two products that we built already. These are kind of like live in productions already, so they, you know, they're out in the wild, right? This is the BEI API that I was telling you earlier about. It's very simple. It's 7 lines of code. Here we have command line, Python, and Node.js. I'll show you in Python just for the sake of the demo. Here, what I have is basically I'm passing an address to this API. As you see, this is the URL. What I'm passing is a protocol name. In this case, like the abbreviation for the stellar one is XLM. I think we might want to change that in the future, but just for the sake of the demo, currently it's at XLM. I'm passing the address, and then you pass an API key, right? Which, if any of you guys is interested, you can contact me after, and I'll give you my information, and we can spin up an API key for you. What you get in return is, depending on which endpoint you're calling, is different information. But for first endpoint, what you basically get is an address label. So in this case, what you have, we give you, first we tell you, hey, this address is actually valid. Then we tell you, hey, the category under which it falls is the exchange category. And if you want to go into more detail, this exchange is actually Coinbase. So, okay, say that you're doing, like, money gets stolen, gets sent to this address, you want to do due diligence, you call the API, it tells you, hey, it's a Coinbase address, you can go and contact Coinbase. Now, the second endpoint is our address rescore API, right? So you just change the endpoint. What you get in return is, you still get the labels, but what you get also in addition to that is a rescore. So you get two things. You get risk level, which is a number between 1 to 4, and then you get like a rescore. Rescore being a number between 0 and 100. So they're kind of like similar things, but on different scales. Kind of like 0 rescore means like very low risk. 100 rescore means like very high risk. Anything in between, it kind of like depends on like the label associated with that wallet, depends on their on-chain activity, and kind of like involvement in other kind of like suspicious activity. Similar for the level, it's just a number between 1 and 4 instead of like being from 0 to 100. Now the last part is pretty interesting. It basically, the last endpoint tells you a little bit more information about what builds up that risk score. So it's not just a black box and we tell you, hey, risky, but that's it. We can't tell you more. We actually show you what the suspicious activity is and what builds that risk score. So in this case, it's a Coinbase wallet, right? So it's a known entity, usually low risk. So they, if any wallet starts with 50 and then, we find that it's a Coinbase wallet, so they usually go to a lower risk score. But given that there's sort of like, there's a serial scam minter that sent money around 87 times on these transaction hashes to this address, then the risk score is not 0 or it's not 20, but it's 48, right? It kind of like moved up a little bit based on like the volume and sort of like the number of transactions that were sent to this address. And as you see, it's pretty long and complicated, right? Depending on like the actual activity of this wallet. I'll show you just another one real quick. I change address This is the new address. What we have for this, it's under the category, it's a scam wallet, and specifically it was involved in like a scam airdrop. Apparently it was sending a bunch of scam airdrop like tokens to other wallets. So its risk score because of that, it's 90, right? And the level is 4. So pretty high risk. Now I'm gonna switch to the last part of my presentation, so I'll go quick. But this is a smart contract catalog that we developed. Oh, were you saying something, Anka? No.
No, all good.
Okay. So real quick, we developed this catalog last year. As I was telling you, it's an open source catalog of different smart contracts that we developed for Soroban. In this case, we have like a crowdfunding smart contract. We have an NFT smart contract and an NFT storefront. We have a soulbound token as well, and an NFT auction storefront. So we tell you a little bit more information. Soulbound tokens, can be seen as a specialized kind of NFTs. They can be used for certifications, degree, historical records, etc., etc. But the interesting thing is that if you click on any of these, so I'm going to go ahead and click on details, you're shown a few things, right? You're shown like a description of these smart contracts and what it can be used for. But you actually have like the source code here that you can go and copy. Now, these ideally can be used, like can be taken and deployed as is, right? But obviously we suggest you sort of like customize it for your needs, right? Or you build on top of those. But at least we wanted to have like a repository of like smart contracts that can be used to build applications on Soroban. Now what we built on top of that I was telling you earlier is an integration with GPT-4, where we take any function in this smart contract and we explain you in plain English what that function does. So if I want to go and get, obviously mint SBT, it sounds pretty straightforward, but we tell you, hey, this means a new SB token transferred to the specified address and setting the URI, increments the token ID counter, and triggers a mint event, right? So it goes pretty in detail about what this specific function does. Now the additional thing that we implemented is an explanation in plain English of what the overall smart contract does. So this is still powered by GPT-4. It tells you what it does, reporting library, setting these constants and blah blah blah. The interesting part is at the end, in my opinion. We basically give you like a light audit report about this smart contract. Tell you, hey, there's a few things around maybe access control, right, that should be improved, right, or some stuff that you can do around optimization and efficiency, right. It gives you some recommendations, etc., etc. So this is like just to show you like the power of AI in kind of like analyzing smart contracts, and also like again we want to build an open source repository for people to like build on top of. So I'm going to be pausing here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up to any questions you guys may have.
Awesome. Yeah, there's definitely a couple of questions. I don't know if folks were just asking a question for you or just like having conversations about what you were talking about. I guess Morgan and anyone who is in the chatting, if you have any specific questions for Francesco right now. Okay, here we go. Okay, Matthias asks, since event emitting depends on contract implementation, does AnChain provide an SDK, probably based on macros, so devs can add attributes on some key areas or events to auto-implement event emitting? It's a long one.
Yeah, it's a long one. Right? We don't at the moment, but it's something that ideally we could go, or someone in the ecosystem can go implement down the line, right? And I have some of my colleagues here in the chat as well, if any of you guys want to help me like answer any of these questions. But no, we don't have an SDK at the moment.
Awesome. Enrique asks, how can we subscribe to the service?
Which one specifically? Well, for any of these services and the free one that I was showing you guys earlier, you can reach out to this email. I'm gonna drop it in the chat. And let me know who you are and what you're building on Stellar or Soroban, and we'll provide you with API access.
Awesome. I think Matthias has followed up. Thanks. If a third party wants to do this, do you provide any specs on what Web3 SOC expects to be able to render on the dashboard?
We can definitely work with you on that one. Right now it's mainly being kind of like internal development, but we're definitely looking for, to partner with other folks in the ecosystem to improve any of the stuff that we build. So we can definitely work together on that.
Awesome. Any other questions? Right now is the time. I guess in the meantime, I'll ask, what?
I see a few from Morgan actually that were buried in the chat. Let's see.
Yeah, feel free to read them out loud and answer.
Who's generating the text for these labels, Humor or LLM? So I believe Morgan, you're talking about the BEI API, right? Because you're mentioning labels for wallets. So a lot of the wallets, and like a good portion of the wallets are collected manually or through automated scrapers. But what we do then is, on top of that, say that we find a few Coinbase wallets, based on the on-chain behavior of other wallets that transacting with that Coinbase wallet, we're actually able to expand automatically those labels to hundreds of thousands of other Coinbase wallets, for example. So there's a little bit of manual human component in actually adding label, and we have a threat intelligence team for that, but we're able to build on top of that and automate a lot of it as well. Oh, I see.
Awesome.
Sorry,
Looks
Jordan. Jordan already answered. Sorry, Jordan, I didn't see your answer.
Looks like Elham has also a question. Elham, do you want to speak up? Okay. Well, in the meantime, Francesco, I would love to know. I guess AnChain has been building on several different ecosystems and blockchains, and I wonder what do you think makes Stellar and maybe Soroban specifically also stand apart, or any specific learnings that you have done so in the past, I guess, year that you have been building on projects?
Mm-hmm. Definitely speed and transaction fees being that low, right, are a huge pro, right? And especially when there's a lot of projects building for remittances or overseas payments, right? That has been, I think it's one of biggest value proposition of Stellar. Now what we're seeing with Soroban is something very interesting, where you're basically bringing some of the biggest innovations in blockchain, which are smart contracts, to the ecosystem. So enabling developers to build, become even more creative, right, on top of Stellar, and basically building to code any sort of application they can think of, but with some of the security best practices in mind, right? I was in Meridian this past year, and I remember the team talking about some of the design choices and that they they made specifically for Soroban, and choosing Rust versus Solidity and a few other things. I think a lot of focus has been put around security, which is essential, because it takes a lot to build a brand and to build your companies, but it takes just a few seconds to destroy that, right? So really that investment on security is super important. And I know Anka, the Stellar SDF is actually providing, like there was an initiative around Audit Bank where you guys were subsidizing some of the audits in the ecosystem, which is, I think it's amazing and speaks to like the amount of like resources that you're putting in making sure that the ecosystem is safe and secure. So these are some of my takeaways.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing your learnings. Yeah, no, it's been a really interesting I guess journey as well, kind of leading up to mainnet. We have indeed, like I think we announced at Meridian that we've been kind of like underground, working with a lot of the like especially like Stellar Community Fund projects. Anyone that's building on Soroban that's building like a very potentially like impactful tool should kind of there be any security issues. So like these are financial protocols and oracles and other like similar projects where the impact could be very high should there be an issue. So currently having security audits being subsidized, I think like it gives them a long way. I think hopefully, I think soon like there will be some public news about it. I know that our marketing team wanted to like time it well with Soroban launch, but we have been kind of like really leading the front with that. And I'm also kind of happy to share, well, probably will be shared soon, but that it likely will be something that we will continue to do within SCF, especially for high impact projects, at least for the coming foreseeable future. Security is very, very, very important, and especially like for a chain that has been live for so long, we need to make sure that with the coming of Soroban, there's not going to be like any disastrous events happening. So, yeah, super excited. Let's see, we have a number of questions here. If you have a little bit of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Morgan asks, what do you think about state expiration as being the biggest differentiator for Soroban?
Let me see. Some of the folks here on the call, some of my colleagues have any ideas? It's a good question, Morgan. I don't think I'm fully equipped to actually answer that, to be completely honest. But I have some of my colleagues here who specifically do a lot of work around smart contracts, and maybe you guys can chat a little bit more after.
Yeah, should I put someone else on the stage at this time? Would that be helpful?
I see they're chatting in the chat, but maybe we can take these offline, Morgan, and I kind of want to get a better idea of like.
Sounds good. Are there any other questions for Francesco and the AnChain team? Matthias is typing. And anyone feel free to ask. Now's the time.
I love it. The chat is very active.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, like we do more of these type of events and really kick off more collaboration. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I assume a lot of you guys were at Meridian last year. Probably some of us met in person as well. But I think these events are great, Anke, to kind of like get to connect the ecosystem together and kind of like. I remember last time I did something like this. I received an email while I was still speaking, and we're exploring right now with sort of like potential collaborations with the folks from the company that reached out. So I think these can kind of like incentivize collaborations in the ecosystem.
Awesome. Yeah, Morgan says RFC, request for collaboration. Great idea. All right, well, thank you so much, Francesco. This was really great. I might ask you to like write something about what you just all mentioned. So, some people like to listen into like a written format, or like in a video format, some like a kind of a more like blog format. So keep a heads up for that, and we can chat offline. Thanks so much for sharing. And thank you also to everyone else from the AnChain team kind of chipping in here and providing more detail on that.
Thank you, Anke, for the invite, and thank you guys for listening, and my colleagues for helping me here.